So with that, I guess we usually start out with introductions. Is that correct? So I'm Tom Peterson. I'm the chair of the Bond Accountability Committee. Greg, you want to go next?
Sure. Greg DiLoretto. I think this is my first full year now on the Bond Accountability Committee.
Hi, I'm Karen Weiland. I'm in my fourth year on the Bond Accountability Committee.
Marina, you want to introduce the staff?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Marina Cresswell, I'm the Senior Director of the Office of School Modernization, and I do have some staff here tonight. They're not necessarily doing any presentations, so unless they're presenting, I don't think they need to introduce, but I'd be happy to turn it over to Dawn and then Mary.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Don Wolf. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Portland Public Schools.
Hi, Mary Weiner. I manage the curriculum adoption process for the district.
Okay, great. Nice to see you both again.
Thank you for having us.
And since the other two acknowledged how long they've been on the Bond Committee, I guess I will too. So I've been on for 9 years. So with that, I think we've got some updates. I'm going to turn it over to Marina and we'll get this going. Hi, Dan. See you just joined us.
Missed the introductions. Perfect timing. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I've put the agenda up, and you'll see that program administration is first. We're also going to be talking about technology funds from the 2020 bond. We'll do an update for the curriculum funds from the 2020 bond. And then the last scheduled item is the discussion of our schedule dates and our work plan for the committee for the upcoming year. First, though, public comment. We did not receive any public comment prior to the meeting, either through email or phone calls. Of course, if we get any afterwards, we do share those with the BAC via email. One quick note that we've started adding to our presentations. There are some data constraints on our business equity utilization data. We do try to call that out for you so you understand that this is based on payments that are made. It is not based on contract values. The data typically is 1 to 2 months prior to when we report, largely because we do rely on our contractors to input data into the system, and that does take time for them to do it once they've received their payments. So there is a self-reporting aspect to it, and the data does have some lag to it as well. If for some reason they don't enter their payments in, we may not necessarily have the most accurate utilization information. The payments themselves will be there, but the equity utilization may not be up to date. And with that, we will go ahead and move right into the program administration. I like to do that first because equity is the first section of our program administration reports. And we are at this point trending slightly higher on our business equity numbers. So we're up to 15.76%, cumulative over 15.71 at the last report. Our 12-month is just as a reminder, is a rolling 12-month. It's just another way to look at the data that says, yeah, there are fluctuations sometimes within the 12 months preceding. So you get to see the trend of the program overall, as well as where the data is currently. Our workforce equity has not changed significantly. We're still at 28% for minority workforce goals, over the 25% goal amount. The female, we remain at 5%, has not changed since we started tracking that, though we do continue working on it. And for apprenticeship, we're at 24%, which is consistent with where we've been probably for the last year or so. Again, that's over the 20% that's required for workforce equity of apprenticeship. If there are no questions on the equity, I'm
I
happy
have
to move on the budget.
just a question on the workforce equity. Obviously, the women number is low. Uh, is there anything that the district can do to improve that, or is it just the realities of the market right now?
So I'm going to say there's yes to both. There, there are realities of the market, and they have not changed. I don't think that's right now. I think that is the way it's been. That is consistent with what we've seen in the time that we've been tracking this. Do I think that there are things that we could potentially do to improve it? In a very indirect way, yes. We don't hire labor for our contractors. So, in terms of direct ability to influence, that's challenging. But in the same way that we try to indirectly improve our certified business utilization on the business equity side, we're certainly looking at what we can do to improve workforce equity numbers as well. One thing I would like to point out is that our performance auditors this year, you may recall that last year they had as one of their focus areas business equity. This year they are moving on to the second of the three parts of equity, which is workforce. And so they are reviewing that as part of their field work right now. And we will see that in their report at the end of the audit year. And I expect that we'll also see some recommendations from them as to how we can improve those numbers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. It's another example of if we can't get the pipeline into the apprenticeship program to try to change those numbers. I mean, that's the only way you're going to change it. It's all about trying to get more women apprentice into the program within, so that the makeup of the construction workforce is different. But that's a slow process. Okay,
it is a slow process, and I think one of the things that we'll talk about when I said that there's a triad of equity, that third part is student engagement. And student engagement is part of equity because that's the point at which we encourage female students and students of color to engage with our projects and be motivated to become involved in our industry, in all the different facets of our industry. So I do think that is going to be on the next cycle of the performance audit reports. And it is something that we're very interested in seeing how we can, are there other things that we can be doing to improve student engagement to help create that pipeline?
Right. Yeah, and I guess since we're on the topic, it's somewhat related also to the safe work environment initiatives that are going on right now. I mean, a lot of times, part of the problem we had in the industry is acceptance by the journeymen and all the folks that are already in the industry. And I would hear that a lot, where you'd get them in the apprentice program, but they weren't treated very well on the job site by their coworkers. And this is I know some of the general contractors are working on this. I'm trying to think of the term. It's a safe workforce culture or whatever. And I got to think that's also a critical piece to change those numbers as well.
Yes, I would agree. And I think we've discussed it somewhat in previous meetings, and it's certainly something that we want to pursue further, but knowing that the performance auditors are working on this right now, I think it's valuable for us to take it as it arrives, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry.
Okay. So moving on to budget in 2012, just a reminder that we have essentially gone through all of the 2012 program. We're at 99% spent. We're really down to the very end of it. We're closing out individual contracts and projects every day. And the two remaining funded projects by 2012 are Roosevelt Phase 4, which the remaining piece of that is really not that the project is not occupied. It is occupied, but there are some pandemic supply chain related issues. There are pieces that have not necessarily been installed yet, so we can't close out the contract until those are done. But the school site is occupied. The students have been using it. So for all intents and purposes, the project is complete. The other project that is in 2012 is the Grant Upperfield Improvement Project. And as I said before, we will use the remainder of our 2012 funds on that project. We do anticipate there is some portion of it that may not be able to be funded by bond funds. We're still figuring out exactly how much that is. And we are in coordination with our non-bond funded capital improvement division here at PPS to address that need. At this point, it's somewhere between 30,000 and 100,000. That's where we think we are, but until we go through and close out all of the individual parts and pieces of the 2012 program and all the other projects, we're still figuring that out. So you'll continue to see it here, but generally speaking, we've been very successful in funding all of the work that was foreseen by the 2012 bond measure, and certainly Grant Upperfield, Roosevelt Phase 4. These were projects that were not foreseen when the measure was passed. We've added quite a bit to the bond measure over the course of time without adding more funding to the bond measure, and we've still managed to complete that successfully. So we feel very good about where we are with 2012. The Grant Upperfield project, I think we've mentioned several times, it is moving forward. Construction is starting shortly. If it did not start today, potentially tomorrow. We were waiting on one last permit. So, Greg?
Yeah, I think I asked you this in another area, but as well. But so we have the Grant Upperfield. We have a current budget of $2.8 million. And yet the estimate at completion is $3.5 million. So why don't those numbers roll over and have the original budget's 2.8, but the current budget's actually $3.5 million?
So we
And if
take
you
all
looked at this, it would say that, God, we went over this project by $600,000 and we weren't monitoring it us being the committee, weren't looking at it very well. So
I appreciate it. It is confusing, and I think for folks who have not been on the BAC for as long as some of the other members, you've not heard all of the explanations, but all the data that we provide is from eBuilder. The original budget for Grant Upperfield in the bond measure was that there was no budget. It was not foreseen in the bond measure.
Right.
We added budget for the project. That is the amount of budget that currently sits in the project in eBuilder. We are still pulling funds over to increase that budget amount. But until we have the funding in place in the project, the budget will only match the funding that's currently there. So we show you that estimated completion to say, this is the cost, and this is how much we need to make up. And then we show you where we think that makeup is going to come from.
And I would jump in. This is not a surprise, at least not to me. We knew this was a problem several months back. And what is encouraging to me is I think the number that you're presenting now, if in fact that's what it ends up being, is 34,000. That's not as high as what I had heard you might be needing when in an earlier presentation. And I think we also know that part of the problem with the upper field was supply chain, permitting, COVID. There's a whole bunch of things that hit it that I don't think anyone anticipated seeing coming. So it's, whereas most of the other projects, the district's been able to mitigate a lot of the issues. This one, they just couldn't. And so it's a problem. And that's why it looks so bad.
Definitely the cost is more than we anticipated when the project was first given to us by the board. So we've had impacts from the pandemic. This is one of the projects that's been probably most impacted just because of the timing of it. That said, I think we're in a pretty good position to fund most of the project through bond funds. We will fund all of the project. It's just that most of it will be through bond funds and some of it will be through non-bond funds. Okay, to move on to 2017. Okay, so 2017 program, I did actually try to make some changes on how we report the financials to try to show, that some of the challenges here are we report out by bond measure. So we are accountable by the dollar amount in the bond measure. The projects can have multiple sources of funding. And so projects can cross bond measures. I don't like it when they do that because it makes my accounting incredibly difficult, but it does happen. And so what we've tried to do is show you and explain in the narrative how the 2020 bond measure, for example, is going to pay for a portion of the work that was intended to be done under the 2017. And so we've talked for quite a long time about 2017 and how it got to the place where it was. I don't think we need to go through that again. But the numbers I'm giving you are sort of my best guess of how much is we're going to be short. And that is that 162 that you see at the very bottom. That could change slightly, primarily because we are still working through the final numbers for Kellogg and McDaniel. We should have those, I think, clarified in the next couple months, but they're not going to swing significantly. There'll be smaller changes, but you might see some small changes in that number. I have tried to show you where we're using contingency to make up some of the shortfall from the projects. So I've really tried to pull aside the sources of funding that we use to make up for project overages, which are contingency, and sometimes administration. If administration is not going to use all of the funds that have been set aside, then those come back to contingency as well. In general, we are trying to shift the MPG project to 2020 funds per the bond measure. As I mentioned last time, you're going to see it in both the 2017 and the 2020. We do currently have 2017 funding in the project. That funding is currently tied in some measure to encumbrances and expenditures that have already been made. We have to shift those encumbrances and those expenditures to the 2020 fund source. It takes time to do that. In the meantime, we are going to continue to show you the 2017 funds that sit there, all of the actuals and the encumbrances that are still on those funds. And as we shift to that, you will see those start to shift to the 2020 program report. In the meantime, the estimated completion will not include the 2017 funds. So you'll see it as a negative there, that negative 5.5 million, because those funds will go back to 2017. The funding will all come from 2020. Now, just as a reminder, when we do our project status reports, those project status reports are fund blind, right? They are based on budget. They are not based on different funding sources. So you will see the full budget picture for the project in that project status report. What you see here is funding based, which can make it a little more challenging to see how a project looks from the perspective of budget, particularly for Benson and MPG. Those are the ones that are most impacted by this. I think we've kind of mentioned this before. The McDaniel project is essentially closing out. The Kellogg project is essentially closing out. They are both coming in under budget. The $2 million that we had transferred to McDaniel for COVID costs, they're actually going to return to us plus some, and that plus some is the piece that we're still figuring out. The Lincoln modernization remains on budget. We have provided you with the information about the updated Benson modernization budget. And again, in response to your earlier question, Greg, and the question you sent by email, the budget that you see there is what is currently funded in the project. Okay. So the estimate of completion is the number that we are looking at. That is the number that was the updated, approved budget that was presented to the Facilities and Operations Committee in November. Go ahead, Tom.
Marina. Yeah. So, and for the rest of you, Marina and I have had numerous conversations about how to portray this in a way that makes sense. And part of the challenge we have is the financial system they have makes it difficult to report it in these other formats that we'd like. But I guess the question I have is at some point, will we amend the budgets to reflect what we think they're going to end up being based on the current estimates on completion?
Yes. Once we move the funding into that project, the budget can be increased. So we can't increase the budget if we don't have the funding to support it.
Yeah.
And the funding right now sits in a number of different locations. And so we will move it from each of those different locations into the project, and then you will start to see that budget increase.
So in other words, at some point, we will see a 2017 budget increase by perhaps 160 million to offset the Benson overage, and the 220 bond budget will be reduced by that amount. Or are we going to continue to have to show it like we're doing it now, where you have a separate? What we'll have to do is just compare the overage on 2017, the 162 right now anyway, or 163, and that'll show up in the 2020 bond in the 2017 budget as I'm still trying to understand how this might play out, so it's a little less confusing.
So right now we have contingency that will need to get moved from 2017 program into Benson. So you will see a shift in the line item within the 2017. That will increase the budget by the amount that we fund from the contingency in 2017.
Okay.
When we fund it with the 2020, we have two options basically. We do need to show them in both of the 2017 and the 2020, because it won't change the color of the money, right? So they will still be two separate fund sources, two separate bond measures. We can show it with all of the budget in 2017 and put zero budget in 2020, but show funding, or we can split it by the actual funding, which I think is going to be the better option. And that's my preference. seeing as we have a number of financial moves to make before we get to that point, I think we can play around with the reporting to report it in a way that makes sense. But we do want to report by funding for the bond measures, which is one reason why we have those project status reports that are really focused on budget.
Yeah.
And on fund sources.
Got it. Okay. More to come. I will say, this breakout though is an improvement from before. We at least have a little bit better understanding of how the various the makeup of the programs are doing, which was something we had asked before. So Benson is the only one that's a tricky one. The rest of them are pretty straightforward, and it's not an issue. It's just Benson is the one that's creating some consternation here, but we'll get there. Thanks.
Greg, you still have your hand raised.
Well, and it's kind of belaboring a moot point, but it's almost about the way it's reported. I've never seen where a budget is related to funds available. I mean, a budget is a budget, and it's how much you're going to spend on a particular project. The funding is related to the funds available. So the way I look at this thing, and granted, to me, this looks like a simple spreadsheet. I get it's not. And whatever goes into it, if you could see all the lines that make up what goes into it, it's much more complicated. But what I look at is a simple spreadsheet. And so, in theory, and I know you're going to move money in, but really the fact of the matter is the budget for Benson right now is $320 million. That's what the current budget is. And of that, you have $116 million in bond funds from 2017. Other funds are what you need, of which they're coming from the 2020 bond issue.
No, the other funds are non-bond.
No, I know that's the way you classify them. But the fact of
Right.
the matter is, in this budget spreadsheet, really, other funds are everything you're going to, in theory, everything you'd put in there to get to your $320 million. I mean, that's the way a budget spreadsheet would look like. And so you don't do it that way, but that's really the way it would look like. Other funds are everything that goes in there added to the current bond funds in 2017 to get you to $320 million. And I think I get it. I understand where the money's coming from. It's just that when you look at it, and if you don't get it, if you don't understand it, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. We're moving.
It's a good call out, though. I can see your logic makes sense. I get it.
It is definitely a challenging thing to represent, and it does require that you spend some time thinking about it and learning about what goes into it.
All right. You want to move on to 2020? We beat that to death, I think.
Okay, 2020. All right, so MPG is sitting in 2020. I've shown the full estimated completion for the MPG project in 2020, so you can see what that is compared to the funding that has been put into the project from 2020 at this point. Now, of course, that additional funding that's necessary will be made up by program contingency from 2020. So you can see that's down there. When we make those shifts, again, these numbers will start to change. The financials, I did want to call out that the financials do not currently show the bond premium or some of the fees from our first 2020 bond sale. They are, of course, in PPS's financial system of record. We do have the money in the bank, I think is the best way to put it. But eBuilder you have to manually enter those items in, and not all of them have been entered into eBuilder yet. Once they've been entered in, you will see them reflected in the numbers above. But those outstanding items include $29.5 million in bond premium from that sale and roughly $200,000 in fees that have not yet been entered. So we will call those out when we do enter them in. Generally speaking, we try not to drop $30 million into our budget without telling you what it is, and that we're doing that. So overall, we have spent out of the 2.48 billion for the 3 programs. We've spent 1.26 roughly. And the majority of that is, of course, 2012, 582 million. And then a little over, what do we say, 68% on the 2017 budget. So we're moving along and spending as quickly as we can. Any questions on the program administration before we move to technology?
I'm going to jump in. This is more of just a comment for the rest of the BAC. At some point, we're going to learn a little bit more about how bond premiums and interest earnings on bonds get added to the budget. If you recall on the Benson presentation at the Facility and Operations Subcommittee, there was, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was an anticipated substantial amount of potential interest earnings as well as some bond premiums that will offset some of the funding shortfalls. But they're not reflected in the budgets yet. Since we don't have a great turnout tonight anyway, and this is really more for the benefit of some of the newer members of the BAC, at some point we'll have a conversation about how that works, and then how and when will we see those budgets increase due to those reasons. So just thought I'd share that. We're not going to do it tonight, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, I'm done.
Okay, and we can turn it over to Mr. Wolf. And
Oh, yes.
FYI, Don, this is the only slide that we have for you, so you can use this as your base.
That is perfect. And I'm going to just start by apologizing. I am off camera. I've traveled to need to be down with my mom this week. So I'm here at her house, and she doesn't maintain the same level of bandwidth that I enjoy at my home or in the office up in Portland. So I hate presenting and not letting you see my face, but if I were to turn my camera on, I would lose your audio, or my audio would be really, really poor. And I'm even finding some of the times it will cut out. So if that happens, please raise your hand, let me know, so I can repeat myself. So we are really just getting underway with all of the projects that are slated for the 2020 technology portion of the bond. We're on the cusp of having all 5 projects are really underway, if you include the program admin. At this point in time, we've spent a lot of time refining. This is new to Portland Public Schools. OSM is a very well-oiled machine to this point, and they've been asked to kind of bolt on another couple of areas. So we're feeling really good about how we're folding into that and figuring out what that workflow looks like, how we get the approval process move forward, making sure that everything ends up in eBuilder in a proper way and all the appropriate approvals. So things will start to move a little bit more quickly for us. We'll point out at just a high level right now, based on our scope and budget, no scope creep yet, so we're as planned and looking good there. Our budget is still very much on track. It's early. Our early projections are bearing out that we're going to stay on track in all of our projects. So I'm happy about that. The one area I will want to point out before I call out some other very specifics on progress and updates is COVID, and all of the things around a pandemic have slowed some things down, and it has created some supply chain issues. So when you see that caution flag under the schedule area, part of that is we're a little bit behind on where we'd like to be starting on our classroom modernization and our infrastructure and security projects, because we're braiding those two things together in order to only touch a school once. We feel very confident that we can catch up and at least make this feasible in the time frame that we have. But you will notice under both of those, as you look at the schedule, on the placement portion for both of the classroom modernization and the infrastructure updates. We've extended those all the way out through the end of 2024. We're going to keep an eye on that. We've issued our first job orders to our contractors that will take on our first 4 schools. Should be able to get those moving here within the next week or two. That will really inform what kind of pace we think we can expect on the remaining phases of the project. So that's one area of concern that we're going to keep an eye on and continue to monitor and keep you up to date with. The other is supply chain issues. We do know that things are delayed. We know that for the equipment that we needed for this first phase of these early schools and the modernization and infrastructure projects, equipment that was ordered months ago is now scheduled to show up in March, so it won't impact those. The next phase, we're scrambling to figure out how we do our ordering and how much we preload the ordering. And we're looking at doing much larger bulk ordering for some of those projects to make sure we have those on site, just because there's, along with the delays in shipping, there's also, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the chip industry and the tech industry, projected increase in costs. So we want to be proactive on that as we manage the budgets for these projects. So right now, pretty confident with where we're at. The one big contract around the ERP work should be hitting the board here, hopefully in the month of February, so we can start getting that work moved forward with a trusted partner to help guide us through getting us set up for success in transitioning to an ERP in a couple of years. That will take a long amount of time to do all of that background work to get ready for that. Want to point out a couple of things and thank our partners in OSM. We do have a bond update website that's publicly available. It was available. It's in the notes in the comments section, pps.net/2020bond-tech. We're providing updates on where we're at in our progress, a way for people to stay updated with that. We're moving forward with the classroom modernization. I talked about that. Our device replacement, we're more than three quarters of the way through with there. The only other particular piece is looking at our support staff. We've got the orders moving forward with that, and then we'll be able to close that particular project out. Should be within this first quarter, or maybe the beginning of the second quarter of this year. We do have a successful cybersecurity assessment that has come back, and we're building a roadmap on what that's going to take place and move forward. Along with that, we're scheduling a number of tech town halls on a monthly basis to let people know what's coming out on that and what might change for folks. And as I mentioned, I'm just looking at the notes here again. Our risks are still really about availability of and timely delivery of the equipment that we're going to need. So if there's questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have. Greg? You're muted, sir.
Thanks, Don. I was just curious, and hope you didn't say this while I was thinking of my question, but the tech program budget went from 23 million to almost $30 million. Why?
Excuse me, the program administration?
Yes.
We moved in process, and Marina can help with some of this. She's got further details on how some of the machinations work behind the scenes. But
yeah, so on this one in particular, I'm happy to jump in, Don. A lot of this has to do with the fact that the ERP replacement project was initially budgeted for a substantial amount, and then we determined that a lot of the work that needed to be done through that needed to be done with non-bond funds. So we moved the bond funds to other places, and you'll see that in the curriculum as well. Similar issue of the program administration is kind of a sitting spot for some of those funds, while Don and his folks are figuring out how to reallocate that to the other projects. So there's a lot of shifting around of expenses to understand where bond funds can be used and non-bond funds can be used. And that's true in curriculum as well.
Okay, so in theory, the original budget may hold, and the extra $6 million will go back in the technology and some other area that qualifies for bond expenditures.
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Don, does that help address it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Tom, you had also raised your hand.
Yeah, I did. So in other words, in the tech program administration, we can assume there's some level of a contingency in there.
Yes,
If I heard you correctly.
Yes. For all of the programs, we rolled all of the contingency into that program administration.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, how much is contingency of the 29 million?
I would have to get back to you on that answer. I don't have that spreadsheet up on each of the individual projects, what was contingency for each project and how that rolled.
So, and if I recall, Marina, you have some fairly rigorous controls that you implement in OSM that moves money around when you need to draw into contingency. Are you using those same types of controls with technology, or is it a little different? I'm just curious.
It is a little bit different with technology. They have not been set up within eBuilder to quite the same level of detail that we have, but we do have some controls in place similar to what we do with the OSM projects and program. One of the reasons you see that there's a program admin there, and then there are some other projects down below. We did that with both technology and curriculum as a way to sort of mirror what we do with an OSM. So you'll see that the contingency sits within that program administration in the same way that it does for us. And that when we do transfers of budget and funding from the other projects, we are always routing them through the program administration so that there's transparency to it, and you can see where the money is going to. So it's not just going from one sub-project to another sub-project. There's always a visibility through the program administration. So that does actually assist in keeping track of the contingency as well.
All right. Well, then, and a follow-on question to the device replacement. So does that increase in budget reflect additional devices, or is it an increase due to what's going on with supply chain and the cost right now?
Are you referring to the other funds, that column in other funds?
No, I'm looking at, the original budget was 31 million for device replacement, and now the current budget was increased by 6.4 million roughly. So that begs the question. That means, you're able to do more device replacement than you anticipated, or is it because things cost way more than you thought? I'm just curious.
Don, I'll step in on that, because that is primarily that they were able to spend more on device. How should I say this? They were able to purchase more devices with bond funds. That's the best way I think to describe it. So they had an opportunity to use bond funds to purchase devices that they had originally fronted non-bond funds for, as part of our discussion of bond funding versus non-bond funding.
Yep.
So,
just out of curiosity, how many devices are we talking about here? I mean, these are spread throughout the district. I'm assuming it affects every one of the schools. And maybe all I need to do is just go on the website and I can get the answer. But I'm just curious the magnitude of what this accomplishes, because I'm sure it's pretty significant.
It is a pretty significant number. So when we talk about our student devices, just in the student device replace program area, there was 34,000 Chromebooks that were distributed. In grades 3 through 12, that was 1-to-1 for those students, and in grades K2, that was done in a 2-to-1 ratio, students to pupils. Now, the disparity you'll see there is that we have some of our schools that are participating in the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools grant. It's 7 schools that Verizon provided them devices in a 1-to-1 fashion for those 6 middle schools and 1 high school. Well, one of the schools is a K8. So rather than it being 48,000, which is approximately our ADM right now, it was 34,000. We also distributed 4,000 Chromebooks or devices to teachers as well. Another 450 to administrators are part of that. And then the last leg of this is about 450 workstations to support our support staff in our buildings.
Thank you.
You bet. Great.
Yeah, sorry, this is the Tom and Greg show tonight, but so you look at the budget overall, it's 128 million, and the funding's 128 plus 2 million, 2.5 coming from other places. But for us as a committee to kind of, I don't know if monitor is the right word, but look at it, it's somewhat confusing. I mean, when we do the schools, you build the school, we see the school, we know it got done. I guess here the check needs to be, how are we doing in that $128 million? Because you broke it up and you've changed it around the crib. How are we doing relative to what was put out in the bond measure so that we can track? I mean, so we can track to see that we're actually doing what we said we'd do, which to me is quite a bit different. And the same applies to curriculum. It's quite a bit different than when we build a school. We get Benson done, we built our school, yay. But did we get all the, you've already said we're going to do more computers than we thought we were. We're going to do this and that. And if all we're doing is saying we spent $128 million and hey, that's what you did, everything's good, I don't know that that's actually helping the school board any by saying we actually did what we said we were going to do. What if for 128 you only get half the computers, for example? This isn't true. So you see what I'm saying? I'm not sure that we're actually monitoring much because we don't know what we're actually getting unless we pull out that bond measure and measure it for what was in there. That actually, I think, needs to be part of the reporting as in addition to the money. But just my thought.
And I would be happy to, and we can work this out. We can have this conversation with Marina in this meeting as well to provide very detailed of what each one of these pieces entail and what's going to be delivered to schools. Right now, everything that we had planned and put into our bond ask to get to this $128, $130 million budget is exactly what we're doing and what we're on track to be doing. What you're just not seeing here is the detail of, the fiber interconnects between wiring closets in each of the buildings and the counts of wireless access points that are going to be putting in. I'm happy to provide that information. We can do that.
Well, I think we just want to be able to compare it to what was promised to the voters. I think that's really what we need.
I think that's a fair request, and actually, it would be valuable for us to sit down. I think, because we're trying to focus more on providing that kind of comparison of information to you for the OSM program. Maybe we need to treat the reporting for technology and curriculum a little bit more like the program and a little bit less like the projects, which is to say, do a better job of providing an overview of where they are in comparison to what was planned, right? So what was included in the bond measure. I think that's valuable, and it's definitely something that I can sit down and kind of come up with some potential ways to format wise to report out on that, working with Dawn and Mary and Tom as kind of a liaison for the BAC.
And I'm going to jump in. I agree wholeheartedly with Greg, which is why I asked how many devices we put in compared to what was planned. And so, yeah, I think an augment to this report to help, and not only for us, but also for the public as well. It's like, well, here's what we did. Here's what we accomplished. And we said we're going to do this, and this is what we've done. And to Greg's point, part of our charge in our charter is to say, did you deliver what you said you were going to deliver? And we need a little more information to do that. This is not unlike the challenge we have with health and safety and some of these other ones that are kind of buckets of money, but are hard to define what exactly we accomplished, specifics, other than we know how much we spent in each category. So this is, I think, an enhancement to this one would be beneficial, not unlike what we're trying to do with some of these other programs that are not as, there's lots to them, but it's a lot of detail. finding that fine line will be the challenge. So, but I guess I would say I'm glad to hear that it's going well. So far, and supply chain, we get it. Everyone's having problems. I do have one question as it relates to supply chain. You did mention timing of orders, is obviously something you got to reconsider. Do you have a problem where you have a risk of price increases because you haven't purchased stuff? How big of a risk is that right now?
I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish. Go ahead, Tom.
No, that's fine.
So it becomes an interesting conversation to have because yes, we're hearing rumblings. We haven't gotten confirmation from our primary suppliers, and we're largely a Cisco shop. So for our Cisco switches, our Cisco wireless access points, our firewalls, all of those components, there has been talk that there's going to be, we got a price increase. We knew there was a price increase coming in December because we had communication from them. Now there's discussion around another price increase. The question becomes, before that happens, do we order all of the other components that we think we're going to need to complete these projects now to try and beat the price increase? And weighing that against, there is a certain warranty that comes when we purchase these devices, and there's a certain amount of time we get with them, but that clock starts ticking once we receive those devices. So if the infrastructure upgrades are going to take us a full 3 years to get through, and we're ordering a piece of equipment or a collection of pieces of equipment right now that have a 2-year warranty on them that we're not going to be installing until 2024, what is the cost benefit between those two actions? And so
Gotcha.
we're trying to work through that and figure out what that sweet spot is to get the most benefit to beat any price increases, but also not to pre-order too many things so that we lose warranty and the value add on the other end.
Okay, thank you. That was it's a good dilemma that you're wrestling with. I've encountered similar things with buildings where you finish parts of your building, years before your whole project's done, and so the warranty gets complicated for that same reason. Part of your building's done, but the rest of the project's not, and you're out of warranty. So I get it. It's a good call out. It's a tough one to kind of figure out what's the best approach. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yep.
Okay, are we ready to move on to curriculum?
Great. Thank you so much. We have had a very interesting 6 months, as you can imagine, on the curriculum side of the house. And we, despite the challenges of having a lot of our program administrators and teachers on special assignment that work with us going out to schools, we've really made good progress with our adoptions. And I think I can't speak for teachers, but a lot of our teachers have been engaged with the process. And I think for them, it's kind of maybe a guiding light outside of COVID of saying, hey, adopting new curriculum, this is great. This will last long after COVID. And this will be something that we can really kind of focus on that's positive right now. And that will really help our students and teachers. So I'm very happy with what we've done. And just to kind of start at the status at a glance, scope and budget are very much on track with what we had anticipated. And schedules in the caution mode. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Part of it is pandemic related. But part of it is also something called Division 22, which is the Oregon Department of Recommendations Standards for Education. which it's basically the baseline standards that all students need to receive in schools in Oregon. And part of that also dictates curriculum adoption and what that cycle looks like. Now, I don't know. I've only been with the district a couple of years, so I can't speak to what has happened in the past, but we haven't been in compliance with the adoption schedule that they would like to see for us for I'm not sure how long. So we've made adjustments to our schedule and working with the Oregon Department of Education to get back on track when it comes to Division 22 and making sure that we are meeting all the requirements of it, which is wonderful that we're doing that. It has resulted in some shifts, but I'm really happy with where we're at. And now, given that, I don't anticipate huge shifts in the schedule anymore because we are on the Division 22 schedule, so we know exactly what we're going to do when. So that is kind of an update, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Looking at the budget, I've talked about this summer. As we roll kind of more and more and we learn more about what can be bond compensable for curriculum and what can't, we've had to rely more and more on general funds, just like Don has said, to help support that work. We've also been leveraging some Title IV funding as well, so kind of braiding together multiple funding sources to make our projects really happen. So most of our budget increase has come from those general funds that represent non-compensable bond items, professional development contracts. All of the curriculum that we purchase, we have to provide professional development for our teachers on, which is very costly, especially when it comes to K through 5 elementary, where there's thousands of teachers, and we really have to make sure that we're providing that robust professional development and field test materials and things like that. We've also been able to spend a good deal of our bond funding, or I would consider a good deal. And I think I spoke about this summer, but our K through 5 math has adopted a new curriculum. It's called Ready Math. And we purchased that this summer and began rolling it out. And I think if we don't have it all paid out now, that contract is very close to being all paid out. Our new science 6 through 8 curriculum, which is called CPUP. We've also adopted a new K through 5 dual language immersion Spanish, a curriculum called Benchmark. And then we've also done a lot of work with our digital toolkit. When the pandemic hit, obviously we've had to turn to a lot more digital resources to help support our students. And so a lot of that work has come out, and we've been able to spend funding on those multi-year digital contracts to support our students' learning, and that's been a great resource as well. So that's probably the largest chunk of funding that we spent out, which is close to $6 million. I think we can go to the next slide. So again, schedule, there's lots of goodie projects on here. Like I said, we're moving towards compliance with Division 22, which has resulted in some shifts in schedule. It hasn't been huge, and a lot of it has been projects that are kind of starting to roll, and that maybe we've extended the timeline for how they're rolling out rather than completely stopping it altogether. I'll read out very quickly which projects we're working on this year. I know that this is sometimes speaking a foreign language because it is not construction related, but this year we're working on 6 through 12 mathematics, K through 12 language arts, K through 12 health and physical education, world languages, and social emotional learning. The thing I found out about world languages in our district is that there are a lot. We have K through 5 dual language immersion programs in 5 different languages. And then we have world language programs in 6 through 12. And then we also have additional dual language immersion. And just to tell you what dual language immersion is, it's what it sounds like. So for some of our schools offer classes K through 5 and then even above in Spanish and English. And so, or Chinese and English and Russian and English. And that's on a sliding scale from when you are in kindergarten all the way up. So in the younger grades, you're taught more in the foreign language. So if you're in a K through 5 Spanish immersion, you're taught, I don't know the exact ratio, but 90-10, so 90% in Spanish, 10% in English. And then as you get older, you're taught more and more in English. And those are for both, sorry, rabbit hole here. They're for both native speakers as well as students that lottery into those schools or are located within it. So just an FYI, because dual language immersion can be a bit complicated, I wanted to tell you what that was. Next year, we're going to be focusing on social sciences, which is social studies, ESL, which is wonderful and has a lot of needs, visual and performing arts, as well as social emotional learning, which is there's lots of aspects of that. And then next year is K through 5 science. So we do have a really good pattern that we're going to emerge from this with, where after this, we'll be able to kind of, by getting on this schedule, it really allows us, after the bond funding has been completed for us, we're able to kind of know what's coming up in regards to our adoption schedule, and we'll be able to fund that out of general funds after this. So really getting on the schedule is twofold. One, it's great that we're meeting Division 22, but then also will allow us to anticipate and plan for future adoptions that are outside of bond funding. Some of our notable accomplishments. So I talked about this last time we were building kind of the adoption process. Oh, thank you, Marina. We're building the adoption process while we were going through all of this. And so we've finalized, I like to call it a working document, but finalized a process for how we go about adopting curriculum, what meetings need to happen, who needs to be involved in the process, how we're ensuring equity in the process, so how we're selecting curriculum to review, how we're selecting teachers to participate on our committees and field testing materials. So it's really a robust process. It is also like, I think the document, I made the font a little bit smaller. So I think it's only about 63 pages now. But there is an abbreviated version if you're interested in looking at that. Another accomplishment, implementing our math curriculum, Spanish curriculum, and science. We've also been able to purchase some baseline curriculum materials for Kellogg Middle School, baseline PE equipment that will help support our PE curriculum throughout the district. We have some field tests underway. So basically, when we're looking at curriculum, we'll generally start with a larger group of maybe 8 different vendors, and we will narrow that down to we'll go through a narrowing down process. It goes through a few iterations, but we'll end up with generally around 2 or 3 vendors that we want to, go field test in the classroom. So we'll recruit teachers that will implement that curriculum. Those field tests can range from a couple of months to an entire year. And so we're in a good process for a lot of our content areas that we're going through the input or the planning phase for. We're also have, and I know we talked about this, we also are starting some engagement evenings for families with our curriculum. So we're kicking off our first one on February 10th for math, 6 through 12 math. So we're inviting families and community members and stakeholders to come learn from our vendors that we're field testing about what the materials are, what they look like, what are the differences, and really getting kind of families integrated in the process and also getting their feedback. And we're making sure that this is all available in all of our partner languages. So we're able to really engage families no matter what language they speak. And we're also recording it, and we're making sure that it's available to families at all different times, whether or not they can attend in person or have to watch asynchronously. And then this also kind of goes to the last thing we talked about are we working towards what was written in the bond and what was written in the measure. So in addition to all of the wonderful work of adopting, we've also begun to embark on a very robust evaluation plan of our curriculum. So we have contracted with an external evaluator, RMC Research, and then our own internal research and evaluation team. And that vendor or that researcher is creating evaluation plans for each of our adoptions. So it's something that we're going to integrate. Obviously, K through 5 math is huge. And then if we've got, 2 classes that are teaching Russian, it's going to be smaller in scale, that evaluation, but we'll still have things in common between them. So we're able to kind of come up with those common factors. And then this will all lead into kind of a dashboard. And so the phase right now, our external evaluator has worked with our K through 5 math team and 6 through 12 math team to develop evaluation plans. And then actually last night at the board meeting, we approved the contract to work with the same external evaluator to implement that plan over the next 2 years. This is also going to be a large chunk of those general funds. It's about $300,000 to really ensure that the $4 million we spent on that curriculum is really being implemented with fidelity to the model of the curriculum and across the board with all of our teachers. And then looking at student outcomes. Are we really moving the needle for our students? So, we know we've received the materials, we know we've put them in classrooms, but this is really kind of that final step that I might not be right in the bond measure, but, if I am a taxpayer and I voted for the bond, obviously, I would want to know, is it actually doing what we think it's supposed to do? And is it actually moving the needle for our students? So this is kind of wrapping that up, not only for our school district, but also for the community at large. It's really important that we, are doing our best as educators to serve all of our students and make sure that what we are providing our teachers is really helping them move the needle with our students. And that's it. Greg?
Well, Mary, that was encouraging about the evaluation, and I assume that we'll get to see that as well as part of our, okay. I was looking at your risks, and I was just curious. You said due to teacher burnout and that sort of thing, it means it's difficult to schedule. So what happens if you can't get the teachers? Do you just go ahead and buy the stuff anyway, or does it just slow your process down, or what does it mean?
So we've actually gotten really creative about this. So we have done a lot of asynchronous work as well. So we've kind of come up with, if we're asking teachers to review, 5 sets of curriculum, we will have one meeting to kind of center our rating. So this is how we are all going to rate based on this scale. This is what it looks like. And then have asynchronous work with teachers where they go back and they're able to do that on their own time, whether that's on the weekend, whether that's in the evening. So we are getting creative with that. We haven't had too much recently. It is a risk, obviously, but with our creativity, 4 years ago, we could get subs and we could have teachers out for days and really focus on this full time, but that's just not the world we live in right now. So I'm pretty positive about the work we're doing and getting creative, and we're still getting we had 100 teachers apply to field test our social and emotional learning curriculum, and very similar with K through 5 math or K through 5 language arts. So I'm positive that teachers still want to be involved, but there's always that risk, right?
Thank you.
Tom?
Well, I was kind of following. Before you got to your risk, I was thinking that same thing. It's like, oh my God, one more thing to tag onto the teacher's workload, learning all this new curriculum. The question I have, given the challenges, is, and I'm going to kind of relate this to a construction project. So. Sometimes when you get behind, you authorize overtime to make it up. And I'm sure the bond program can't fund teachers' time, additional time for teachers to learn the material. But it seems like, given the situation, that may be something the district needs to think about, that there's another cost associated with rolling out this curriculum that comes with, their time and extra demands you're putting on them to try to roll it out. On the other hand, it sounds like they're pretty enthusiastic about what's coming. I'm guessing because what they've been dealing with is is some of it maybe a bit outdated. So I'm sure there's, it's not like you're forcing to do something they don't want to do. It's more of just they just don't have the bandwidth for everything right now. So it's just a thought. The other question I had, what was it? You added a new item, this digital toolkit that wasn't listed. So, and I assume that wasn't a line item in the actual bond measure, or was the curriculum that well defined in the bond? And then what drove that? Was it this all online learning change that's driving this, or I'm just curious how that came about, because it wasn't, if I recall, it wasn't in the original list.
So it was, and the original list that you're referring to, I'm not 100% sure what list that was, because there's quite a few, but there was like learning management systems, and it had other names attached to it, so I'm not sure if it's that list. But, oh, Tom, did you have?
I guess what I was referring to when I was looking at the budget, there was a new line item added that was, I think it was called digital toolkit. Yeah. And so there was no budget for it originally. And so it begs the question, was it not anticipated in the bond measure, or is it something that's come up since the bond measure that you have to address now? So that's why you added it. But fortunately, it doesn't look like it was detrimental to the other list, and because you were able to come up with other funding to augment it. But I'm curious what happened there, why that wasn't originally anticipated.
So I would call that a late addition to eBuilder. So when we originally were breaking this up, I was focusing on certain areas. So I was focusing on all of the core content areas like health and humanities and math. So when it was originally put in eBuilder, that's how we put it in. And then there was kind of this other things that we were not sure what would be compensable under it. And then the digital tool. So it was always planned to have it in. It's just when everything was originally entered into eBuilder, that was one item that we hadn't sorted out completely.
Okay. They had a number of different ways to break things up into projects. And there was some discussion about how to do that. And so what you'll see is that line item that says unallocated curriculum funds. That was that bucket of funds that we knew we were splitting up. We knew where it was going. We just didn't know what we wanted to title, right? We weren't quite sure how, all the money's here, all the scope is here. Do we split it this way into projects, or do we split it this way into projects? We were still kind of figuring it out. So we did want to be clear, again, original budgets, it's challenging sometimes, but we didn't want you to think that the money wasn't there in the first place. The money was already there. We just hadn't allocated it to that particular division. And that also, Greg, that explains too the change in the program administration. We took some of those funds and put those into the program administration as well.
So in the program administration, it's fair to say there's some level of contingency, just like the technology, to deal with potential overruns in some of these areas for, supply chain or whatever they might be. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. And then that also represents, there were some things that we came in and we were hoping could be like large purchases, like middle school redesign. We were hoping to contract with somebody for $5 million. And that is just not bond compensable. So it does involve the contingency, but it also involves funding that we weren't able to spend on certain projects that we now, over the lifetime of the bond will put towards curriculum. We just don't want to loop it into one funding source yet, because we don't know exactly what that will look like.
Yeah. So follow on. I'm curious also is when this curriculum program was added to the bond program, I'm sure there was an understanding that not all of this would be bond compensable. I mean, I was surprised that it was, to be quite honest, when I saw it. That was like great. Uh, but did the district anticipate this additional 6 million when it was knowing that not everything you wanted to do was going to be able to fund from the bond? And did that have? I'm just curious. Did that have any kind of a detriment on the rest of the district's budget, or had they anticipated this? Do you know?
I don't know if Marina wants to take it or me, but
Or
I can
Dan?
take that if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reality of compensability on something that has not been put on a bond measure by PPS previously, there was a lot of learning that had to occur. And to be fair, we continue to meet on a weekly basis to review compensability by line item for both curriculum and technology. And it is because it's not a cut and dry capital improvement on the construction side of things where we know those inside and out. With curriculum and technology, we've had to sit down and we meet. This is not a decision I make. This is finance based in many respects, but we sit and we talk through what the definition is of capitalizable. And then how does this fit within the bond measure language? So we're continuing to do that. Because of that sort of learning curve, I don't think the district anticipated an amount that was going to be required to address compensability. At the same time, the district has also worked very hard to identify other things that are compensable and fit within bond measure language that might have not have been originally foreseen, so that we can free up some of those general funds to pay for the non-compensable items. And that's been true of both the curriculum and the technology side.
And in subsequent years, so in next year's budget, I'm already working on what those general funds needs will look like, so we're able to properly budget plan. And I've been in touch with our budget department and prepared to fill out my budget workbook and get everything going so we can make sure that we have enough funding to pay in the future for those general fund expenses.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting project, and it's I would say it's pretty exciting as well. It's I'm trying to, when's the last time that you've done a rollout of this magnitude?
Never.
So,
Never. So it's definitely interesting and fun.
Oh yeah, it is interesting from my perspective too. So thank you. I'll be anxious to see how it all plays out and how well the teachers accept it and all that stuff. So
well, if you want to learn about 6 through 12 math curriculum, we're going to be having some BAC time and some digital time in a couple of weeks, so that then you'll get to see a little bit more.
I may have to learn how to do math. I may have to learn how to do math totally differently than how I learned it. So
it is completely different how they teach it now. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hop off. I'm going to help my husband put my baby to bed and my other kid. So, but thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to more presentations in the future.
Yeah. Likewise. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you, Mary. So last scheduled item is to talk through our schedule for this upcoming year, trying to be a little bit more advanced scheduling this year than we were last year. We struggled with some last minute needs to change, including in November, and we're going to end up with a similar issue this year. And so I wanted to bring up the schedule and just kind of talk through both the dates and also the special topics. And so if we could just kind of start with the dates, that's probably the easier one and the quicker one, I hope. We have two in particular that I think could be problematic. One of those is during spring break. That's going to be challenging, I think, on multiple levels. And the other one is the day before Thanksgiving, which is an issue we ran into this year as well. if I can make a recommendation, it would be that we push both of those earlier by a week. I would like to check those earlier weeks to make sure that we don't have conflicts with other PPS meetings. So does that sound reasonable? So the one thing with March, if we push it earlier by a week, that would allow us a little more time to prepare the quarterly report for the April Facilities and Operation Committee meeting, which I know Tom will appreciate a little more time.
For that.
So Marina, are you suggesting instead of the 23rd to make it the 16th?
Yes, with the caveat that I need to check our calendar and make sure that we don't have other meetings there that would preclude us being able to do that.
Yeah, okay.
They work for me. I just wonder, we only have, what, 3 of us on the call tonight, or are we?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it's great for Tom and I because we get to hog the whole thing, but at some point, we have some other folks. So do we know? I mean, these meetings are all published pretty far in advance, so I can't imagine why we're having this.
We've had some
I
late
had 3
cancellation.
notices just before the meeting, Greg. So yeah, it was 3 of them were a surprise.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if Kenichi said she was going to be listening in. So I don't know. I don't know if she's on, but not maybe on Zoom. And I haven't heard from Darren. So there may be more, but they're just not able to participate from a virtual perspective. I don't know. But you're right. I'm disappointed as well. I guess the other question.
You guys know that. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I was on the call. I heard everything, and I heard all your questions. And it's okay that you two asked all the questions. You answered all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
Hey, Maria. The only thing that I would say is that for me, moving from the 23rd to the 16th in November will be a conflict for me. But other than that, I think I'm okay. So.
Okay.
The other thought I had is, does it have to be a Wednesday? Could it be a Tuesday or Thursday? I mean, are we locked in on a Wednesday also?
So Tuesdays are a challenge because they often conflict with board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely one where we can't do an overlap on that.
Okay.
The Thursdays, we used to have our subcommittee meetings on Thursdays, and so we tended to avoid that. But
Okay.
I can certainly look for those as well. I will look in the week before on both of those two and check to see what dates are available. And then I sent out a doodle poll last time. I got some response, but not great response.
Yeah.
Is that a bad option? Is it better to do it by email?
I do a lot of doodle polls. They're great.
I think doodle's fine. I'll bug people to make sure they participate this time.
Okay.
So
We will get
turnout.
right on that. In fact, Derek, I see you're on the call. If you can help me out in getting this out to them.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. So, topics. We have pre-populated, if you will, some of the things that we've talked about in the past. I don't know, Tom, if you want to talk a little bit about the financial audit. And, sort of some of the discussion that you and I had about the financial audit.
Yeah.
The presentation scheduled. We ended up not doing it this last year. Now, we haven't done a financial audit presentation in several years to the BAC.
Yeah. And I looked at the presentation that was given to the board, and a lot of it was, really into the weeds of the organization. There wasn't a significant amount specific to OSM. However, it was good background information for me about the district and how it's funded and the challenges and the complexity of the financial audit for the overall district. But so there might be a benefit for an abbreviated version, perhaps, that focuses specifically on how the audit approaches the aspect of the school district's budget that we're overseeing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there would be a benefit, I think, a refresher for me and definitely for some of the newer members, a conversation of how interest earnings and all that stuff plays into budgets, and when they apply and when we see them, would be something that I think we ought to plan on at some point as a special topic. That was kind of my reaction. If Karen and Greg, if you want, I can send you the link to the financial audit, and you can peruse through it at your leisure.
You just have to look at those when I had a job.
See the whole thing or not.
Yeah, no, thank you. I do think the part you said, Tom, about the part of the audit that pertains to what we're doing, I think that's important because you've now got another party looking at it, and that certainly makes sense. But all the other stuff that are in a financial audit, no, thank you.
No.
Done it.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about
And
you,
I do
Karen?
think I don't know if we need special projects when we do the modernizations ones. They tend to take a long time when we go through them. We're only covering them twice a year now. And so I think we should make sure we have the full meeting to go through those modernization projects. We do get the reports, but we get to see the pictures. And since we're only doing it twice a year, it seems to me that probably is a big enough nut to occupy most of our time.
Yeah, I would agree.
I agree. I think it would be great to have an update on Lincoln. I mean, I go by it almost every day. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it would be good to get just an update on where you guys are with the planning for those high schools that are in the 2020 bond. So like Cleveland, Wilson, Roosevelt.
Not Roosevelt, Jefferson.
Jefferson, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Roosevelt was the first one.
I did provide
Jefferson,
just a really brief, couple line update. I say couple line. It's like one line in a couple different areas. That does say what's going on with those projects. And I can just kind of reiterate or re-summarize, but with Jefferson, we are currently evaluating the proposals for the architecture and engineering services for master planning and design.
Okay.
With the others, Cleveland and Ida B. Wells and Roosevelt Phase 5, we have funding for master planning and design. Those are not going to start until 2023. So they are specifically pushed back so that we can tie into additional funding sources from a potential future bond for construction if that passes. So we want to avoid having too much of a gap between when we complete the design and when we have funding for construction. So those are pushed back.
Yeah. Okay.
I like your idea, Greg, of not doing special topics on the dates that we have the modernizations. I think you're right. They do take a lot of time to go through. Mm-hmm. So happy to keep those blank.
Yeah,
that works.
Just as a side note, I had reached out to Angela. There was a presentation on the ADA transition plan, I believe, is that correct? To the Facilities and Operations Committee in December, and unfortunately I missed it. But it was brought up. There was a kind of a follow-up conversation at the Facility and Operations Subcommittee meeting in January. So it kind of begged the question, and I know the ADA is a special interest to Angela. So I was kind of debating as to whether we want to get some version of that in front of the BAC, so we're we kind of understand what's behind that. And then to the extent when we're reviewing projects, we can understand how some of these ADA issues are being addressed, might be beneficial. I was hoping we could do it next meeting, but in light of the fact that it's the modernization, I'm guessing it's something that's maybe we should defer it till the 25th. And actually that's probably not a bad time anyway, because there's a bunch of ADA work embedded in some of those projects anyway. So, but what I was planning to do was review the presentation, kind of like I did with the financial audit. Think about how much of it is relevant to the modern, our scope, and then maybe we'll add it at some point in the future. Just a heads up. So I have on to the next topic, but I have a request for the next meeting. Could we do it at Lincoln, or is it still too far in construction where we couldn't do a meeting there? Or is there a tour opportunity for Lincoln?
We can discuss a tour, but we're not going to be able to hold the meeting there. At this point, we're not able to do a meeting at Lincoln. If we were to do a meeting on a school site, it would need to be fully at the site,
right,
for committee and staff members only. And we would offer live streaming, but we would not offer a virtual option to call in. So those are our constraints for being on some sites from a technology perspective. And I would say right now, Lincoln is not a great place to do that kind of meeting.
You mean a hybrid meeting? It'd be a live meeting only.
It would be a live meeting only, and only for committee members and staff. It would not be for the public.
Yeah. And is that a problem if the public couldn't attend?
No, the live streaming fulfills our public attendance function.
You just wouldn't be able to get any public comment.
We get public comment by way of email and phone. So that's how we advertise it when we put out the public notice for the meeting, is that they can send public comment ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get on my soapbox here, and unfortunately, I don't have the rest of the bond committee to hear what I have to say. So I'll share it with them offline after the meeting. But given the challenges that I've experienced and some of you have experienced with these hybrid meetings, I'm of the opinion that we alternate that so that we can continue to go out and see progress or tour facilities that are about to be modernized, because to me that's as important an aspect of our role as just sitting and listening to presentations. And the only way we can do that is we physically need to be on those sites. So I would like to advocate that there be a combination of in-person meetings, and we can alternate if for those where that's a challenge to do continual in-person meetings. But these hybrid meetings don't work very well. I just talked to Norm. I asked him how what he listened in on the facilities and operations meeting. He said the audio was terrible. He could hardly hear anything that was said. That's been my experience. That's why we did this one virtual only. Because when I watched the December meeting, it was the same thing. I couldn't hear half of what was said. When I was present, I couldn't see the screen because the room was so big and you couldn't even read the detail on the screen. So from my perspective, they don't work. So we either do one or the other, and there's a need for us to be physically present in some of these facilities occasionally. So that's what I would like to advocate for. Now I know there's, I'm guessing of those that are present, I'm speaking to the choir. I'm not sure that the rest of the members of the bond committee feel the same way, which is unfortunate because it would have been nice to have had that conversation with them present. But that's my thoughts. I'm curious what anyone else thinks.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, Tom, you're talking to people that already agree with you, so I don't know that it's any issues with us. It's the other 5 or 6. So.
Maybe problematic. And I know a lot of people, and for us, granted, I'm retired. I'm not trying to hold a job, raise kids, and do all the other things other folks are being asked to do right now and still serve on these committees. So I'm sensitive to the fact that it's, might be easy for me, but it's not necessarily as easy for them. And a lot of people really like the remote virtual format. I know a lot of my former colleagues that love it. So I respect that, but I also think that there needs to be some kind of a happy medium here, because there is a need from time to time for us to see these facilities. And since we can't do hybrids at the facilities, there's only really one option. And frankly, if this is the best turnout we're going to get anyway, what the heck difference does it make?
Committee of 3.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. So, Marina or staff, you have any? I mean, obviously you're the ones that have to put up with us. I'm curious what your thoughts are, reactions are to my little grandstanding here.
No, it's fine with me. I think, of course, we used to do all of our meetings out at the school sites. That was a big part of what we did, because we wanted you to see. Sometimes we wanted you to see the schools before we touched them.
Exactly.
And sometimes we wanted you to see them after. It is an opportunity to get out and see sort of the impacts of the funding, right, and what we're doing with it. That's invaluable, and we can't really recreate that in the virtual meetings. We do, there are some logistical things we'll have to work out, but we've mentioned that before, and I do think it's viable for us to work them out. We may find that our live stream quality is not quite as professional because we're going to be doing more of it ourselves, but we'll get to see you in person. So, there's the.
Well, and I'm not proposing that every meeting is done that way. That maybe it's a compromise. We alternate, for example, so that for those where it's a hardship, obviously we want their participation. So I don't want to do something that limits some people's ability to participate. So maybe there's a compromise solution where, we alternate. One month we.
I agree. I would ask that we remain mindful of what things look like in the pandemic world.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that's a factor still right now. The other reason we did meet virtually was because of what's going on right now. It also served another purpose. But at some point, we're going to be able to resume some level of normalcy.
Yeah.
It's been kind of frustrating that for the last 2 years, other than the special tours you've offered us, we haven't been in any of the schools.
Yeah.
So I'll follow up with the rest of the members tomorrow and see what kind of response I get, and we'll I don't know. It doesn't. Is it fair to say it may be a stretch to do the March one at Lincoln?
We're not going to be able to do Lincoln for a meeting right now. It's not in a place where we can do that.
We couldn't meet at the actual old high school?
We have done them at the actual old high school. I have actually very strong memories of the last one we did there. And I think Karen does too, because I think Karen remembers how hot it was.
Yeah, I do remember it very well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I thought.
This will be March, Maureen. It won't be as hot.
Right.
I'll leave it in your court. I'm not
Okay.
going to push it too hard. It's just a suggestion. I don't want to put any additional burden on you guys because I know you're already really busy. But it would be nice to see it at some point, and maybe we can do it at McDaniel for those of us that didn't get a chance to see McDaniel as an option.
Yeah, that was going to be my thought too. But let me see what I can work out.
Okay. All right. What else did you have on the agenda?
That's it. It's free time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Greg
All
or
right,
Karen,
thanks,
you
guys.
have anything you want to share about?
I think I've talked enough tonight, so I'm good.
No, I'm good. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Marina.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Good
Bye.
presentation. We'll talk more.